Hi everyone, welcome back to the Way Out West YouTube channel. Today I get to talk to 8BallAitken, who will be kicking off our 2023 calendar this coming Sunday, February the 5th from 2 p.m. Promises to be a great gig. I also want to send out a big well done to Mr. Frank Sultana, who has just won the Memphis Blues Challenge representing Australia. It's a fantastic effort, and it adds to our previous winners, Jimmy Hocking and Fiona Boys. Not bad for a little country kicking above their weight in the home of the blues in Memphis. Hope to see you all Sunday. Bye for now. Can you tell me about your early life? Was music a big part of you growing up in North Queensland? And I believe your dad was a great influence and mentor as well.
My dad was quite a good finger picker. His favourite guitar player was Chet Atkins. So we grew up with plenty of guitar playing around the house, and he was, sang a lot of old 70s Bob Dylan and Dire Straits was his other favourite band. So, grew up around music. He wasn't a blues man, though. That was my brother and I's rebellion. We decided we were going to be improvisers and jam. And up in North Queensland in those days, you could get John Lee Hooker cassettes at the local Crazy Clark's shop for like $1 or $2. So we were just lucky. We ended up getting into blues as teenagers.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask about North Queensland. It seems to have a really strong blues and roots leaning. Why do you think that's so? And what was Johnny's Blues Club, or what's that?
Jono's Blues Bar. Yeah, so I used to play in there since I was 15. I won the Gong Show, and they said, you win a free carton of beer for winning the like open mic night. But they said, oh, you're only 15, so we're giving you this T-shirt, and I felt really ripped off. but it's the way things work. Is there was the community getting together and playing music, and on Saturday nights we'd always have campfires and jam sessions, and just guitar and singing songs was such a part of life. And growing up, my first job was as a banana picker. So we used to sit around with a bunch of the guy that ran the place was a Maori family, and so they used to have hungies and sing lots of incredible harmonies. And I just got an education in music without even realizing it. It was just what we did every day up there when we weren't working. So blessed to just the life that you live without even realizing it. That's how I grew up.
You mentioned earlier that you had some John Lee Hooker stuff, which is a great grounding, but you tended to lean more then towards swamp blues. Where did that leaning come there?
Yeah, that was a little bit later. I got right into Delta blues and Chicago blues and every kind of blues I could find, whatever I could find. But when I heard Tony Joe White and JJ Cale, they kind of went off in that direction. And then I went really into that direction when I lived in Austin, Texas, because that's such a part of the scene over there. And I got to work with one of my greatest songwriter mates is Guthrie Kennard, based out of Dallas, Texas. And he played in Ray Wiley Hubbard's band for about 10 years. And I ended up doing gigs with Ray Wiley and Guthrie and playing with Ray on his radio show, and just getting to know heaps of incredible swampy blues musicians around Texas. So that's how that all happened. And that's when I ended up in the studio with JJ Johnson from Tedeschi Trucks band, making the Swamp Blues 1 and Swamp Blues 2. Such a gentleman, that guy. And, just one thing leads to another when you're out there doing it in America. So I'm glad I got to experience all that and make that music.
I had a question about Ray Wiley Hubbard, but I'll jump to it. It was a little bit later. My Ray Wiley Hubbard story, I've never seen the man play, but I've got a lot of his music. I was at Lafayette Park in New Orleans for some music in the park, and there was two guys and a lady walking towards me, and the guy had on a hat, a baseball cap that just said Ray Wiley on it. And as he got closer to me, I said, that would be Ray Wiley Hubbard. and he heard my accent. He said, how would you know about this guy? And I said, I love him. And we hung out for the next 4 or 5 days, just, drinking beer and listening to music. But he was quite surprised that someone from so far away knew who Ray Wiley Hubbard was. But tell me a little bit more. I think you got to meet him. And if people aren't acquainted with Ray Wiley Hubbard, why should they get acquainted with him?
Ray Wiley's a really interesting and funny lyric writer, and that's what sets him apart from the rest. He's just got such a keen sense of humour, and he just simplified music down to a lot of one-chord songs that don't rhyme and with stories, and he's just very lovable. So I was playing at this festival in Florida when I first met Ray, and I had an Arnott's biscuit can guitar, tin guitar, I should say, and that was made in Yak and Dander by my mate Shane Sol, and I was just mucking around with that, and Ray stopped his sound check and came over, and I made friends with him and Lucas, his son, backstage. So that's how that started. He gave me his number and said, call me when you get to Texas. So I went down there and played his radio show and hung out with him, and I said, I've been already working with Guthrie, and so I just ended up in Texas, and I had a management out there, and I was just working 6 nights a week for several years. So I could have stayed there, but I ended up with more opportunities in Nashville, and then after COVID, I ended up going, look, I just want to be closer to family, so I came back to Australia. Yeah. So, but I'm so glad I got to spend those 9 years. And I spent a lot of years going back and forwards before that too. So a huge part of my musical development and life has been playing around the Deep South, which is where it all started. And yeah, you sort of get really immersed into it, and it's the people that you live with and work with that really influence you over a long period of time. So it's not just like going there for a weekend or a couple of weeks. It's like when you really live there, you get to understand what makes the place tick.
Yeah, I'm interested that you mentioned Nashville. I know you lived there and worked out of there for some time. So why would a blues artist go to Nashville, like the home of country music?
Well, Nashville's the home of every music because there's thousands of studios and the best session players in the world. So there's a healthy blues community there as well. And it's just a very central place to tour out of, and there's a lot of industry and things that you need. So Nashville's just the hub. If you're going to be in America playing music, you should be in one of the hubs: Nashville, Austin, New Orleans, somewhere where you can operate and tour from is a good place to be. Nashville was that place for me. And when I moved there, it was before the big boom. I moved there in 2010. So it sort of feels like it's doubled in population. There's thousands more clubs and studios than ever before. But I was there just after the financial crisis, and there was not a lot going on, to be honest.
Interesting. We're heading back to New Orleans for my 10th trip. It'll be my last big tour, but I've never been to Nashville, and we are going. So I might get you to pick your brain later for some places that I must go.
Go to East Nashville, because that's the home of all the alternative music. And I think a lot of people's perception of Nashville changes when they go there and realize that pretty much the most dedicated musician and songwriter from every town in the world ended up there. So it's just a crazy cosmopolitan place, because even the people in the big country bands and playing the big like rock gigs and stuff, they'll be playing jazz on a Monday night, and Cuban music on another night, and whatever music every other night of the week. So the most interesting music you ever see with the best players is all happening there. And it runs on a different sort of a pace to New Orleans. Don't get caught in the tourist trap on Broadway where you hear the same the top 40 country stuff. It's East Nashville where you hear the really interesting music.
Yeah, this isn't a question I had down, but that's interesting to say that, because a couple of times I've been to Memphis and you go to Beale Street and you think, man, if I hear Mustang Sally one more time, I'm walking out. It's like that Beale Street is just playing for the tourists now.
Yeah, so there's always that part of every town. I mean, Bourbon Street in New Orleans is the same thing. It's a party town, but when you know the right places to go, you find the real local stuff. And in Nashville, that's the case. I mean, in Memphis, it's the case too. When you get off I spent so many good nights in the back blocks of Memphis where locals brought me to jam sessions and clubs and places where you can't actually get to if you just wander down the main drag and hear Mustangs. You just got to have friends. You got to you got to find your people, I think.
Yeah. I've found them in New Orleans because I've been going there so many times, and you're right. You get into the neighbourhood places and you go with locals, and then you get a real feel for what it would have been like rather than Bourbon Street, which is, everyone has to do Bourbon Street once, but once you've done it, you don't want to go back there. So, yeah.
No.
Frenchman Street's a great music street in New Orleans.
That's the one.
I was interested too that you had a bit of a love affair with R.A. Guthrie. That you used to sing that classic album quite often. R.A. is a man that puts a lot of humour into his music and songs, and I see you doing that too. Why do you think it's important to have some humour as well?
I think it's just the way I was brought up. My dad had that Alice's Restaurant on cassette, and we listened to it before we went to school. And we just beg him to put it on. We knew every word, and it's a 20-minute song, so it was just fun, And you get started, and I just find it boring to be serious for too long. And having said that, I put out a soul album last year of all my heartfelt songs, because in COVID it was hard to play your electric guitar and be Jimi Hendrix in your lounge room by yourself in lockdown. So I put out a soul album of like sort of social conscience and love songs, and it's no surprise it was my worst selling album of all time. So I love doing it, and I think for me, music is writing songs about all the different emotions that exist, as many as you feel. Music is how it makes me feel. That the way music hits you is what keeps me interested in pushing forward with my songwriting. But I always come back to swampy blues rock with a sense of humor, because it's just more fun. And everyone's got their thing, and if you find your thing and you still enjoy it, you keep going. I mean, I don't want to ever be as formulaic as some of the successful rock bands that have been going for 50 years. There's music that's too formulaic, but knowing who you are and what you love, I think, is pretty paramount to making something of your music.
Yeah, I agree, mate. You recorded a very successful album, Swamp Blues 2, whilst living in the States. Can you tell me about some of those legendary guest musicians you had on the album? I know you've mentioned one guy, but there was a who's who of music on that album.
Yeah. I think that was it was the second album that I had Buddy Leach play on, who's the sax player from George Thorogood's band. And Buddy's become a really frequent collaborator. We've written probably 30, 40 or more songs together. And so he lives in Mississippi. I just caught up with him when he was out in Australia a couple of months ago. So Buddy and I have he's a music writer, and I write a lot of lyrics. So he sends me stuff and I send him things. And during COVID, we pretty much worked every day on stuff. So yeah, you just make your friends and you just get into it. And that was also, I'm getting my timelines mixed up. I started working with Taya Charney on the album after that. And we've worked on the last 3 albums together. So I can't remember who else you might be. I was working with Glenn Fukunaga on bass, who played with all the stars, and Dave Percival, who has an amazing studio with all the analog gear in Wimberley, which is also the town Ray Wiley lives in, down about an hour south of Texas in the hill country, which is a very beautiful area. So that all just sort of happened, and I did a couple of albums. I kind of wished I could have done more, but the world changed, and I ended up producing my own albums ever since those 2 came out. And now I'm building a studio at the moment in the Sunshine Coast, and starting my own place where I can play music all 24 hours of the day if I want to, with the right, with soundproofing and yeah, you just progress on your music journey. And once you made so much music yourself, it's like time to help other people with their projects.
And that brings us to, you did mention there's a new single being released in a couple of days, and the new album's going to be Ice Cream Man 2. Did you record that album at home, and who plays on that album with you?
Well, Ice Cream Man 2 was actually the leftover songs from Ice Cream Man 1, and I tracked all the drums with Tom Hambridge in Nashville in 2020 in lockdown. But they've been sitting around for about 3 years because I've released another 2 albums in that time. And I just kept plugging away and working on those tracks until I got them where I was happy with them. I actually think it's a better album than Ice Cream Man 1. And so I'm really excited. This is my biggest album of banging blues rock stuff and guitar solos. And yeah, so I had the same cast, my regular sort of team that I work with now. So Buddy Leach on sax, Taya Chani on backing vocals, Tom Hambridge, Buddy Guy's drummer, and he's, you know, pretty much the biggest blues producer in the world. He's just, everything he touched turns to Grammy-winning gold, that guy. Except for my album hasn't won a Grammy. But
Well,
yeah,
you
maybe
never know.
Yeah,
you never know.
Tom's and I even wrote one of the songs on there called The Friends We Make, and it's just 12 new tracks I'm so excited to launch this year. And I've got the pre-sales up on my website, selling the vinyls and all that, and the CDs, and dropping the tracks one by one on Spotify each month.
Oh,
so I'm so excited about this album this year, and it's the biggest, bangingest blues rock I've ever made.
Yeah.
So yeah, excited for people to hear that and to play it live. My brother's doing all the Hammond organ parts, but I recorded most of it in Nashville, but I finished off a few touches over here.
Really looking forward to getting that. And it's great that vinyl's back, man. Everyone's buying vinyl now. It's fantastic.
It gives me hope for the next generation of musicians, because there's so many people these days whose parents never took them to see a band. That's what's sad, is like there's a generation of people that don't know music made in real time by people because they've just grown up with DJs and every music that's computer generated beats. So that sort of makes me sad that, and you know, being about to become a father, I know I'm gonna take my kid to watch music played by people live without loops, like actually show them what actual music is. And I'm not saying that music with loops isn't music, but it's a different kind of music that doesn't breathe with it. Like once there's a beat that's programmed, it's completely even increments without as much dynamic, and you just can't beat the energy of a band. So you know, that's what still gets me excited, is it's the friends that you make music with and the relationships you have and the fun you have together and the way you make people feel. And so I'm just so excited about life in general every single day. And just creating.
Yeah,